Welcome to Tech Primers. In this video, we are going to see what is MongoDB and how we can use MongoDB inside a Spring Boot application using the Spring Data MongoDB. So Data has a integration with MongoDB and it is called Spring Data MongoDB. So we are going to see that with an example. So let's see what is MongoDB first, right? So as you all know, MongoDB is a document database. So if you are not familiar with what is a document database, so document database is different from a traditional relational database where you create tables before starting something, right? So before persisting data into the database, you start creating tables with a predefined structure. However, MongoDB is different from that. So it is a document database. Basically, you can create data in different structures. So basically, you are going to persist documents. So documents are nothing but, like, for example, JSON is a document. So MongoDB supports JSON format for storing documents. So it's similar to JSON. So that's what they call as documents. So but in terms of our view, it is JSON. So you can directly persist a JSON into the MongoDB database. Okay, so that is why it is different from a traditional relational database. So as you see, these are different features. So that's what they are mentioned in the MongoDB website. MongoDB stores data in flexible JSON like documents, meaning fields can vary from document to document and data structure can be changed over time. So that is what the major advantage of MongoDB is. Also, you can do normal query processing, indexing, real-time aggregation and stuff like that. The major thing is it is free and open source, and also it is distributed, so you can deploy MongoDB in different clusters and you can scale them across. So that is one more thing which is why people go to MongoDB, so you can scale it across. So in a traditional relational database, you cannot scale just like that until now, right? So MongoDB gives you the flexibility of scaling across distributed um, nodes. So based on its mechanism, so it has its own mechanism to scale and stuff like that. And also the major thing is it is free and open source. Okay, so I have downloaded MongoDB from their website. So since I have a Mac, I have downloaded their Mac OS edition. So it's just a tar file basically. So it's just a zipped file. So I just unzipped the MongoDB folder which they gave, and then I just set my path to that particular folder. That's it. So now I can directly start MongoDB using the MongoD command. Okay, so that is what I have done. So you can check that in the MongoDB website. If you have a Windows machine, you can download their exe file and then install MongoDB. And before starting anything, you have to start the MongoDB server so that you can create your application to connect to that MongoDB server. Okay, so now let's get started. So let's go ahead and create this create a project from the Spring Initializer. As you know, I always use Spring Initializer to create Spring Boot application. So I'm going to give the package name as Tech Primers Mongo, let's say MongoDB, and I'm going to give the artifact name as Spring Boot MongoDB example. Okay, so the dependencies which we would require are we are going to expose this as a REST endpoint. So basically I'm going to integrate Spring MVC. So I just say web, and also we need MongoDB, right? So I'm going to say MongoDB. Okay, so you can also use embedded MongoDB, but we are not going to use that. So people use in-memory MongoDB for testing. So if you notice here, it is mentioned for testing. So like a H2 database, you can bring up your MongoDB instance inside the same instance of the JVM, but not going to do that. I'm going to show you with a traditional MongoDB connecting from our application. So let's go ahead and generate this project. Okay, I'll just save this. I'll unzip it. Okay, it has got unzipped. Let's open it with IntelliJ. Let me open. So I named it as Spring Boot hyphen MongoDB. Yeah, let me open this project. Okay, let me maximize. Okay, the project is open now. So if you notice here, it has got just the main class. Okay, what we are going to do is we are going to create relevant packages. So I'm going to create a package called config so that we can add our configurations there, configuration classes. I'm going to create a package called resource so that we add our REST resource there. Why did it create under this? Let me delete it. So I'll create config. I need one for the document basically. So I'll just create one for document. Basically, that's the model for us. And also we are going to create repositories. So we are going to use Spring JPA kind of notation. So if you are not familiar with Spring JPA, Spring JPA is the standard which Java has created, the Java Persistence API. So we are going to use that. So let's go and create the configuration. So I'm going to say MongoDB config. I'm just going to name this class as MongoDB config. So what we need is we need to annotate it with configuration so that Spring Boot bootstraps this particular class before we start. So when the application starts up, this has to be loaded, right? So the next annotation we need to add is the enable MongoDB repository. So any like any other JPA repository or uh, Elastic repository, right? Spring Elastic repository, you have to enable the Mongo repository, and also we have to give the path of the package. So we have to give the base packages. So I'm going to give so in fact you can give base packages or classes. So let's see which is simpler. So I'm going to just give the classes so that I can directly give the class name here. Okay, so I'm going to create a users repository. So I'm going to use a simple user information. I'm going to give a user repository and I need to create this user repository. Let's create that in a few minutes. I think we can create that now, right? Okay, so I'm going to use the repository folder for that. Okay, why is it something is stuck, right? Okay, now I think we should be able to. So I'm going to create a class under repository. The directory already contains a okay, it has already created, is it? Right. Okay, so we have already created it, but I don't know why this is showing up as a different file. Let me delete it and recreate it. So users repository, unable to parse the template class. Why is it up to not the Java file type classes? Why is that? I don't know why it is saying like that. Let me rename this to user repository. Okay, fine. I don't know what happened. I think the user's repository name got screwed up, or I think it's not deleted. Fine. Okay, I have just created a user repository. This is basically an interface. So what we need to do is we need to extend an interface called Mongo repository. So we have a Mongo repository. So like the JPA, we already have Mongo repository created by Spring. So so I'm going to say that use my users model and my primary key is integer. So users we have to create now. So I'm going to create users. So this is basically the document which we need to create. So I'm going to put it in the document folder. Now comes the major part. You need to document annotate this class with a document annotation so that Spring can identify that okay, this is a document for the MongoDB database. Okay, so if you notice here, this document annotation is coming from the MongoDB package. So what all fields do we need? So we have said the primary key is integer. So then we have to add name. I'm going to say name, team name, and I'm going to say salary. Okay. And also we need an ID, right? So I'll mark this as ID. I'm going to mark ID as ID, and let's create some constructors, getters, and setters. Okay, so we created it. Now our document is done, our repository is done. So if you are not familiar with what is a repository, what is how JPA works, you can check my other videos on how what is a JPA and what is Spring REST and stuff like that. You will I have clearly explained what is the JPA concepts there. Okay, so I think we have all the environments ready. So now what do we need to do here? I'm going to say user repository. Right here I'm going to use the command line interface, okay, to inject some data into the Spring into the MongoDB. So what we are going to do is we are going to expose a REST endpoint, and using that REST endpoint we are going to retrieve some data. That's all. Okay, and I'm going to inject data into the Mongo database using the command line runner. So this command line runner will be invoked by Spring Boot when it starts up. So what do we need? We need to implement this command line runner. It's an interface basically, so we need to implement something here, right? And I'll use the lambda expression for it. uh, so what we need is the users repository in our case. So I'm going to say inject the user repository here, and I'm going to say user repository dot save of new users. I'm going to pass some id 1, let's say Peter. I'm going to pass development is the team name, and some salary, right? Okay, so let me remove this so that we can have lambda expression. Okay, so that's it. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to inject a user into the repository. So I can include one more user so that we have multiple users, right? So I'll just say to Sam operations. Okay, so this is going to inject data into the MongoDB database when it comes up. So when the application comes up, these two data will be injected into the MongoDB database. So these two documents will be inside the MongoDB. So now we need to write a REST endpoint, right? We need to write a REST endpoint to retrieve this data back, right? So I'm going to create a resource. So I'm going to say users resource. I am going to use Spring REST, Spring MVC basically. So I'm saying REST controller. I am annotating with request quantity, and I'm going to give this passed as REST slash users. Okay, and what do I need? So I need to expose a all REST endpoint, and I'm going to say I am going to return list of users, right? Get all, and I'm going to return. Okay, I'm going to return from the repository. So let's go ahead and create our repository, right? So I'm going to say user repository. Okay, I'm going to add this as a constructor so that this is auto wide automatically. From Spring 4 it gets auto wide automatically. You don't have to add the add auto wire annotation. So I'm using that. I'm just saying file down. That's it. So what we have done here is we are exposing a REST endpoint called rest slash user slash all, and we are querying the repository for all the users which are there. That's it. Okay, so that is it. We have added the configuration. We are adding data into the Mongo data store. We have created the document store, and we have created the repository. That's it. So now the only part remaining is the configuration. So now we need to tell Spring that I need to connect to a database instance, right? So I'll give the name of an application name for our application. So MongoDB example. So now we need to add some MongoDB related configs, right? So we need to add Spring Data MongoDB. So since we are using Spring Data MongoDB, so the config starts with Spring Data MongoDB, and the host name we have to provide as localhost. So since I am going to run it locally, so I'm going to say it localhost. The next one would be the port. So I will just give the default port with which MongoDB runs. So the database I can give as Mongo. Okay, for now I'll just create it as Mongo. The next one would be we need to tell MongoDB that we are going to use repositories. So I'm going to say repositories also enable true. So basically you are saying that okay, I'm going to use MongoDB repositories for persisting the data. So if you don't like the way MongoDB repositories work, So like the Spring JPA repositories, you can use your own client, the Mongo client. Okay, so in this example we are going to see the Mongo repository. So I think that is it. So we have added all the necessary configurations. So before starting this server, we need to bring the MongoDB instance up, right? So let's go ahead and bring that. Why did Safari come up? So let me go to the command prompt, right? So I'm inside the download folder. So we downloaded the application to Spring Boot Mongo example, right? Yeah. So I'm going to start the MongoDB server. So I'm going to say Mongo D, and I need to provide the path. So before that, I'll create a folder called data, so that data hyphen MongoDB, so that the MongoDB related data is stored inside here. So I'm going to give this particular path for the MongoDB server to come up. So I'm going to say Mongo D and DB path is equal to dot. So I'm just saying that, okay, start my MongoDB instance and store everything inside this particular folder. Okay. So if you notice here, the MongoDB server has come up, and the port it is using is what is the port? 27017. Yeah. Okay, so we are going to check if the same port is being used here. Yeah, it's the same port. So let me start the Spring Boot application. So this Spring Boot application, when it comes up, it's going to now connect to the MongoDB instance. Okay, I have triggered a run. Meanwhile, we can go to the REST endpoint and keep it ready. And by the way, we haven't given any port number, so let's add a port number for us, right? I'm going to say that, okay, start the Spring Boot application under the port 8091 or 95, let's say some new port I'll use. Okay, so I'm going to say Spring Boot to start this particular server in the port call 8095. So I'm going to keep that ready. So slash rest slash users slash all. This is going to be a REST endpoint, but right now there is no server running. That is why we got the error. So if you notice here, the Spring Boot application has come up successfully. So and also you can see that the connection has been established with the Mongo server. So let's go to the Mongo server. And if you notice here, sorry guys, let me drink some water. Yeah, so if you notice here, we have persisted Peter into the MongoDB instance already, right? As a part of our command line interface, we have already done that. So if you notice here, this is the data, and you can see that Peter has got persisted already, right? And same way with Sam. Okay, so both the data got persisted. Now we need to query the REST endpoint so that it can retrieve the data from the database. So I'm just refreshing the REST endpoint, and if you notice here, so the data has come up, right? So we have received this data from the MongoDB server, literally, and you can see that here it has retrieved. Okay, so this is how you use Spring Data MongoDB inside a Spring Boot application. So you can use the MongoDB queries similar to how we use the JPA repositories. So you can use all the capabilities inside JPA for querying the MongoDB database. Okay, that is it for this particular video. So if you want me to do any specific topic, a video on any specific topic, do let me know in the comments below. I can do that. For example, this MongoDB I did because many of you guys requested for it, and in the next video we will see how to integrate Spring Security into this MongoDB connection. So we already used Spring Security with MySQL database, so we are going to see Spring Security with MongoDB for authenticating you guys. Okay, so that's it for this particular video. Meet you again in the next video. Thank you very much.